look at a study by Stats SA. Around about 10% of households saying that they have someone who can work from home. For the most part, people have to get to work and they have to get to school, just like that councillor was saying a little bit earlier. So we're going to take a look at the general household survey released by Stats South Africa in 2018. This is the latest survey, by the way. Let's take a quick look at the numbers. So basically, Tamelo, researchers went to households around South Africa and said, over the past week, have you used public transport? 37% said that a member of the household had used a taxi during the week prior to the survey. That might not sound like a lot, but remember, we have about 16 million households in South Africa. So 37% of that, that's about 5 million households. That's a lot of people, Tamilo. Buses, 6% of South African households saying yes, they'd used a bus over the past week, and trains a little bit less, around about 3% of households in this country. So clearly there is a heavy reliance on public transport, and that really poses questions about the way that the Transport Ministry is going to sanitize these environments. We'll have to see how that unfolds. But let's focus on transport to work, because that is crucial. People have to put food on the table at the end of the day, and it seems, Tamelo, it's difficult to do it if you don't actually have access to public transport. So these numbers, again, coming from Stats SA, about 34% of South Africans using a private vehicle to get to work. Interestingly enough, 1 out of 5 actually walking to work. But if we look at public transport, these numbers are quite interesting. 24% using a taxi to Melop, another 5% using a bus, a train, again 2%, and a lift club. This is quite fascinating. 2% of South Africans saying yes, that they actually use a lift club to get to work. Of course, that might sound economical, but we're living in the age of the coronavirus, and of course a lift club means that you are interacting with other people in the vehicle. So quite a lot of people having to rely on public transport simply to get to work. Tamelo?
Yeah, and speaking of just reliance on public transport, I mean, schools may be closing this week, but pupils will be coming back eventually and using the very same public transport.
That's it. And my colleague Tsehoacho Moagi was saying just now that a lot of parents, in fact, are concerned about the use of public transport. Not so much about the schools themselves, but the fact that their children have to use public transport to get to school in the first place. Let's take a quick look at the numbers when it comes to school transport. This is also a fascinating story to me. What you'll see is a lot of children, in fact, are forced to walk to school. Just under 10% using a private vehicle. In other words, their parents probably dropping them off at school. But still, a large reliance on the public transport sector. So taxis, 7% of learners using taxis, about 12% using a group vehicle. So that's typically when their parents will club together and arrange for a driver to take a group of children to school. In terms of a bus, around about 4%, and then a sponsored taxi or bus, so that's typically a free service that is offered to learners, again, another 3%. So you're looking at about a quarter of school children relying on some form of public transport to get to school. And remember, Tamilo, we have 13 million learners in South Africa. So we're talking about 3, maybe even 4 million young South Africans exposed to public transport. And I'm sure that's a concern not only for the Transport Minister, Tamilo, but also for the Basic Education Minister.
All right.